Over 25 years ago, I moved to Japan. I had reasons. I always have reasons. I had work. I had a community. I had a decision that made sense on paper. What I didn't have, what I didn't know I needed, was a different relationship with time. Japan has a word, karoshi, death by overwork. It exists as a legal category, a recognized cause of death, because the phenomenon became too common not to name. You don't coin a word for something that happens rarely, but living here taught me something more useful. It taught me to observe the gap between the official story and the lived one. And in that gap, between the national narrative of productivity and the reality of exhaustion, I found something missing. Rest is not a reward you earn when the work is done. It is a requirement for doing the work at all. I'm Dr. Dédé Tetsubayashi, AI Governance Advisor, first-generation Togolese immigrant, Black and queer, and something I've spent a long time learning to say plainly, I have a chronic illness. Sickle cell disease doesn't announce itself on the outside. On a good day, I look like someone who has everything together. On a bad day, I still look like someone with everything together because I've spent years learning to perform that. That performance is a form of labor. It is one of the most expensive kinds. This week in our Women's History Month series, I want to talk about labor, specifically the labor that doesn't get counted. The emotional labor, the relational labor, the labor of managing a body that has been told to be quiet, the labor of performing wellness in a world that punishes visible need. And I want to talk about rest, not as a lifestyle brand, not as self-care content, but as a political and governance act. Japan taught me to observe gaps. There's a concept here called shokunin, the craftsperson who gives full attention to their work, not because someone is watching, but because the work deserves it. The sushi chef who has been perfecting the same technique for 30 years. The ceramicist whose pots hold water so precisely that the water itself seems to be listening. Shokunin is about the relationship between the maker and the thing being made. It is attention as integrity. I've watched women practice this for my entire career, with organizations, with communities, with other people's children, with the meetings that needed facilitation before anyone acknowledged they needed it. Full attention to work that nobody was naming as work. And I watched those same women get to the end of a day, a year, and be called burned out, as if something malfunctioned, as if they had failed to manage themselves properly. Burnout is not a personal failure. It is what happens when you take a person's labor seriously enough to extract maximum output from it, while refusing to take that person seriously enough to sustain what makes the output possible. That gap between taking the work and not taking the worker is what I want to name today. Women's History Month does a particular thing that I both value and find insufficient. It counts what women have contributed, it names the discoveries, the inventions, the leadership, the firsts. And that counting matters. I did a version of it myself in week 1, but it tends not to count the labor that made those contributions possible. The emotional labor of navigating institutions that weren't built for you. The relational labor of maintaining relationships. The labor of translating your own expertise into a language that a room full of skeptics will accept. The labor of being the only one in the room who looks like you. Managing everyone else's discomfort. That labor is real. It takes time and energy, and it is disproportionately extracted from women, and most disproportionately from women of color, from disabled women, from queer women, from the people already carrying the most. Here's the AI governance connection, because I want you to see it clearly. When we build AI systems that encode historical biases, we are building systems that automate the labor of navigating bias. Every time a resume screener downranks a name that sounds Black, the candidate has to work harder for the same outcome. That is labor extraction encoded into software. It runs at scale. It runs continuously. The women who named this, Dr. Joy Buolamwini, Dr. Timnit Gebru, Dr. Safia Umoja Noble, Dr. Ruha Benjamin, did so after doing that labor themselves. Their research is not abstract. It is personal testimony translated into methodology. When you dismiss equity concerns as political noise, you are not protecting your organization from politics. You are refusing to see the labor you are extracting from the people your system is failing. That labor is happening. You are just not paying for it. I want to be careful here because rest as resistance has become a phrase stripped of its content. Rest is not a bubble bath. It is not a 4-day work week perk while the workload stays the same. Rest, as I mean it, is the recovery of your own judgment, the decompression of the performing self, the return to your own values about what the work is for and who it's supposed to serve. For women who have been taught that rest is weakness, that stopping is failing, choosing to rest is an act of disagreement. It is saying my capacity to think clearly matters. My nervous system is not an externality. The quality of my judgment depends on conditions I am allowed to protect. I have spent 15 years in Japan learning to read my own body. Sickle cell taught me my body has limits. Fighting those limits is a losing strategy. The more useful strategy is to learn the terrain, to know what depletes and restores. That knowledge, knowing what you need and protecting those conditions, is not a luxury. It is craft. It is shokunin applied to yourself. I run retreats in Japan. Rest as resistance retreats. Small groups, intimate, designed for women in technology and social change. I designed them because I needed them, and they didn't exist. The conversation that happens when you remove ambient urgency is different. The thinking is different. The connections are different. The decisions people make about their work are different. That's not a retreat. That's a governance investment. The quality of your AI governance decisions is upstream of your conditions. If you are making those decisions in a state of chronic depletion, you are making them with impaired judgment. Protecting your capacity to think clearly is not a personal indulgence. It is professional responsibility. The full article for this week is linked below and at drdede.substack.com. If you're interested in the retreats, in what it looks like to actually build recovery into your practice, the link below will take you there. Next week, we close the series with the evidence. Subscribe. I'll see you next week.